Everyone. Today I want to talk about the election, obviously. I'm going to talk about an aspect of it, and that's polls. The polls were horrendously wrong in this election, just like 4 years ago. Now, when I put up my election predictions, I predicted Donald Trump would win, but I was right about the polling. I was right that Donald Trump consistently performs above what he polls, and it's an average of about 2 to 5 points. It was actually more in this election. It's just that I thought that Trump would take the Rust Belt by a few percentage points, and it ended up being less than 1% on the other end. But if you saw my percentage predictions, I was better than the pollsters by a lot, and I'm just a schmuck with a microphone, and these guys spend millions of dollars. Anyway, let's get into it. Nationally, the average of all the polls had Biden winning by 8%. He's going to win by about 2. That's about a 6% difference. Alaska, he's going to win by a little bit more than 6 points. Arizona's probably the only one that they got right, the pollsters. And there's still a lot of votes out, so that gap might close a little bit. Biden's going to win, but it might not be by 2. Now let's go to Florida. This was a bad one. The average of all the polls had Trump up by 3 points. Now, Trump won Florida by 4, so that's about a 7-point difference. Georgia, Trump's probably going to win Georgia. This was basically a dead heat. They were within the margin of error, but still, it was in favor of Biden. All of these polls, even if they're within the margin of error, they end up on the side of Trump. Even when you go down to places that Biden's going to win by a ton, Trump overperformed. Trump is getting about 40% of the vote in New York right now, which is about a 7% increase in what the polls said he would get. Michigan was pretty bad. Biden's going to win Michigan by about less than 1%. It's going to be maybe 1%, and all the polls had Biden at 5.5 plus 6. Some of the polls were even worse. Minnesota, Trump's going to lose that by he lost that by about 7%, about 2% difference. Now, North Carolina was a dead heat. Again, Trump's going to win that by about 2 points. Ohio was awful. Ohio was basically a dead heat. They had Trump up by 1%. He ended up winning Ohio by 8. Pennsylvania, Trump's probably going to win Pennsylvania. We're not sure. It's going to be close. But they had Biden up by almost 4 points. South Carolina, he won that by more. Texas was Trump by 1. He won Texas by 6. Wisconsin was one of the worst of the batch this time. Biden was had by an average of 9.2, and Biden's going to win Wisconsin by less than a percentage point. All down the line, Trump overperforms Nevada. The pollsters had Biden up by 5, and Trump's going to lose that by less than a point. It's just kind of sad that people that spend millions of dollars on polls can't get it right. And I think the reason for that is that they can't capture the Trump voter. A lot of Trump voters don't want to be captured. A lot of Trump voters don't trust the polls. They don't trust that their voice is going to get heard, and they don't want to be polled. There is such thing as a shy Trump voter. Shy Trump voters that don't tell people they're going to vote for Trump because they don't want to be ostracized. Because if all their friends think all Trump supporters are Nazis and terrible people and racists and this and that and this phobe, they're not going to say anything, but they're going to quietly vote for Trump. Now, even though Trump lost, he still way outperformed what his polls say. Now, I also think that the pollsters, when I look at some of the polls, they're getting it wrong. A lot of the polls will measure not likely voters, but registered voters, and you're going to get a difference there. A lot of times they don't ask the right questions, or they ask them in the wrong order. A lot of the polls are very long, and if you have a shorter poll, a lot of times you'll get a better result in your shorter questions. And the questions that the pollsters ask also make a difference. Like, a pollster can ask, who do you support to be president, Donald Trump or Joe Biden? But they can also ask, who do you think will win, Donald Trump or Joe Biden? That's a different question, but sometimes the polls only ask one of those questions, and it skews their polls. And I also think a lot of the polls, one of my friends called them the poll mafia. They get results and they look at other polls to see if their results are within the same margins as their competitor polls. And also, they're usually hired by media companies, a lot of these pollsters. So CNN will hire a company to go do a poll. And if they come back and say, well, Biden's ahead by 6 points in Texas, CNN's like, yay, we'll hire you again. But if they come back and say Trump is ahead by 5 points in Texas, CNN might be like, what's the matter with you? No, go to another poll. So I think a lot of these pollsters are also in a bubble. And I don't know what they can really do to capture the Trump voter, although they don't really have that problem after this election. Because the Trump voters come out for Trump, but they don't necessarily come out for Republicans. The 2018 election showed that when the Democrats took the House. I think the Trump supporters saved the Republicans in this election cycle because the Republicans kept the Senate, which a lot of people thought they were going to lose, and they actually gained. They gained in the House. They didn't take it over, but they gained seats, which a lot of people thought that they were going to lose seats in the House. So the Trump voters did help the Republicans in this election cycle. I don't know what's going to happen in the next election cycle because there's no Trump. Now, those voters are still going to be there, but I'm not sure if there's any candidate that can go out and capture them like Trump did. So I'm not sure what the next election cycle is going to look like. Hopefully the polls will be better. But after 2 election cycles in a row, presidential election cycles, where the polls were absolutely horrendously wrong, I don't trust polls. Now, the pollsters said in the first election, well, we were right nationally. We were only off by a couple points in the national poll. But this election, they were off by 6, at least 6. So I would say don't trust the poll. Maybe they'll get better in the next election cycle because there's no Trump. But anyway, remember, never to believe in anybody's propaganda, not even your own. Thanks. Bye-bye.